What is the impact of microplastics on carbon sequestration in the oceans? Hello, friends. Jim here. Well, an interesting article here that appeared in phys.org. Microplastics may slow the rate at which carbon is pulled from the sea surface to the depths. In other words, microplastics may impact carbon sequestration to depth. It turns out plastics in the ocean do more than suffocate organisms. A new study co-authored by Northeastern researcher Aaron Stubbins shows that microplastics may reduce the ability of the ocean to help offset the climate crisis by slowing down the rate at which carbon is taken from the sea surface to the depths. Oceans basically are part of a carbon sink process. Right? You get a whole bunch of dead phytoplankton, a whole bunch of other dead organisms. They clump together, and when they get heavy enough, they start sinking. And we call it marine snow. Now, of course, vertical thermohaline flow will also transport dead organisms, will also help sequester carbon to depth. But in addition to that process, that mechanism, phytoplanktons get large enough, they start sinking on their own. Well, that is now being impacted by plastics. How, you may ask? We'll get to that. So basically, when the oceans sequester carbon to depth, that is the marine analog of how trees and plants on the terrestrial surface take carbon from the atmosphere and store it in the soil. And for example, as the methane, as the permafrost thaws, well, methane and CO2 have been stored in the permafrost. It is now being released to the atmosphere. So instead of the permafrost being a carbon sink, it's now turning into a carbon source. Well, you can think of the carbon, the marine snow that falls to depth, as being a carbon sink. That is also changing. Research by Northeastern shows that microplastics in the ocean are slowing the process down by making the marine snow more buoyant. Ooh. Plastics want to float. If phytoplanktons grow on microplastics in biofilms instead of as free-living organisms, that changes the buoyancy of the phytoplankton when they die. So plastics are slowing down the sinking rate of the marine snow, which is potentially reducing the efficiency with which the ocean can remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. He published his findings in Marine Chemistry. And they did a little experiment where they had phytoplankton free-floating as they usually found, and then phytoplankton basically entwined with microplastics. And then they went and saw what happened. And the phytoplankton entwined with the microplastics didn't sink as much. And this is Professor Stubbins right here, looking at something through a microscope. Basically, they timed how quickly they sank the ones with the plastics were slower by about 20%. He says the study done in collaboration with the University of New Hampshire, Durham, shows the slowing of the descent rate of marine snow mixed with microplastics comes at a time when carbon sequestration is more important than ever. As that carbon is sinking, it is being transported deeper into the ocean. It is important for how much the ocean offsets warming due to human emissions of CO2. Okay, a couple of points there. Yes, organisms die, they sink. They're taking the carbon with them. But there's other mechanisms. I already alluded to one of them earlier, which was thermohaline flow. That can also facilitate carbon being sequestered to depth, not only as part of the organisms themselves containing carbon would be an example of particulate organic carbon, POC. Well, you also have dissolved inorganic carbon, dissolved organic carbon. That's where the thermohaline flow helps sequester that to depth. Thermohaline flow slows, DOC, dissolved organic carbon, DIC, dissolved inorganic carbon, does not also get sequestered to depth. So this is not the only mechanism by which carbon gets sequestered to depth. That's the point I am trying to make. Okay. Another point is that as the oceans warm up, gas solubility decreases with warmer water temperatures. So the CO2 is not going to readily dissolve into the ocean, and it's going to linger and build up in the atmosphere. A second part of the study involving Ariana Patterson, who graduated from Northeastern in 2023, found that microplastics dissolving in sunlight on the ocean surface reduce nutrient availability for phytoplankton. Whoa. Okay, so what's going on with this? When exposed to sunlight, the microplastics dissolve like sugar cubes and produce organic carbon that bacteria can use as food. But growing bacteria also need nitrogen and phosphorus, and they can get it by basically taking the nutrients that phytoplanktons would normally use, and then slows the growth of the phytoplankton. Here's another point to make. Bacteria are often referred to as nanoplankton. And we really don't know that much about the role of bacteria to the food web, the carbon cycle and budget, but it is important. So this needs to be further investigated. So it sounds like there's a competition, and the bacteria might be taking the nutrients away from the phytoplankton, but still, you can have other micro plankton grazing on the bacteria. So that's another important part that needs to be. We need to more information on that. Phytoplankton are plants of the sea. Yeah, okay. Now it turns out that so are the autotrophic bacteria. That is another important group of producers. They're the ones capturing carbon from the atmosphere, as are the autotrophic bacteria. By adding plastic carbon, you further reduce the efficiency of the biological carbon pump. Okay, that there is no disputing. Microplastics are everywhere. Concentrations in the ocean continue to increase. This could be a threat to global scale processes such as the carbon cycle, which of course is important to life. There's still not enough information to say definitively that the presence of microplastics will weaken the ocean's ability to sequester carbon, or what a critical level of microplastics might be, but it does it seems to be having an impact. The study shows the impact of microplastics on the carbon cycle is significant enough to create alarm, cause for concern, and needs to be addressed. So, as I said, microplastics are ubiquitous everywhere in the ocean. From the Arctic Ocean to the Marianas Trench, they're everywhere. This, if further studies bears this out, this has major implications for the carbon cycle as well as sequestering carbon itself. But remember, carbon comes in numerous forms. You have, in the form of plankton, it is particulate organic carbon. You can have dissolved inorganic carbon, dissolved organic carbon. The sinking of marine snow is one mechanism to sequester carbon to depth, as are physical processes such as thermohaline flow. So we need to keep all that in mind. What we now need to tease out is what is the contribution of each of these mechanisms to the overall carbon sequestration, carbon cycle, and more work needs to be done on the bacterial aspect. Because nanoplankton is poorly studied, but it is important. It is a critical part of the ocean food web system. So, another example of why plastics are bad. It's not merely that organisms ingest them and it causes physiological problems, which is serious. It's this other potential impact. So, until next time.